Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm J. Jean Rose Burney, the Deputy Director at the West New York Land Conservancy. I'm glad you could make it. I'm glad you could watch this presentation and give us your feedback too as we go through some concepts for the design for the Riverline. In total, the presentation should last a little bit under an hour and a half. If you have questions during the presentation, or comments or anything you'd like to share with us, it'd be best if you send those to our email address, theriverline@wnylc.org. We won't be able to answer questions live on YouTube in the chat. So again, it'd just be best if you send those questions or comments to us at that email address. During the event, we are going to ask you some questions though. So there's going to be a separate link. You'll find out a little bit more about how to use that later. And after the event, you'll find more information about the project, about these concepts, and interactive ways to provide feedback on our website, wnylc.org, and on the riverline.com. So now I'd just like to turn it over to Nancy Smith, our Executive Director. Nancy?
Thanks, J. Jean. Good evening, everyone. We are so grateful that you're joining us on this journey to create the Riverline. The most important thing tonight, and as we advance this endeavor, is that we are listening and creating with you. So during my brief remarks, we'll showcase a few images that we received from the community over the last couple of months. Robin Wall Kimmerer says that to love a place is not enough. We must find a way to heal it. I believe that we can both heal this place and have it help to heal each one of us. Across the country and in Western New York, we have a newfound appreciation for the value of time spent in nature to nourish us, our bodies and our spirits. The Riverline can play a role in this, and with your support, we will make it happen. Congressman Brian Higgins, thank you for standing with us in so many seasons and at so many places. You joined us in the springtime at Tewksbury Lodge, at McDermott Lofts in the Valley to celebrate our design ideas. This past summer on Alabama Street in the Old First Ward for the mural installation. And at Silo City this past summer to show off Let's Go Buffalo's Goats. We greatly value your enthusiastic support and counsel as a champion of our fresh water, our waterfront, and the Riverline. Senator Tim Kennedy, thank you for your commitment to this place and to finding creative ways to strengthen our community. It's been such a pleasure working with you to advance the Riverline, and we appreciate that you are committed to leaving no stone unturned as we work to create a place that benefits everyone. Assembly Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, you are such an inspiration to us. Thank you for helping us forge connections and strategize about next steps to build a trail and greenway that is a welcoming and inspiring addition to Buffalo's Renaissance. Sarah Heidinger, as our steadfast advocate for ensuring that this is a community-led process, you are an incredibly valued contributor to the Riverline. You have been walking and talking with us since our first visits to the corridor. As a juror in our design ideas competition, on the selection committee to pick this design team, you have invested your time and deepened our understanding of your community. Your clarity that the Riverline must happen with us and for us, not to us, has been irreplaceable. I thank our W-led design team for immersing yourselves in our history, our culture, our stories, and the nuances of this place. Thank you for bringing your wisdom and your years of dedication to your craft of placemaking to test us by asking the right questions as we stretch our own understanding of what the Riverline can become. I'd also like to thank the Land Conservancy team, our board, our staff, Anthony Armstrong from Make Communities, and our supporters whose commitment and generosity makes this work possible. Our heartfelt thanks to our visionary funders who are highlighted in the slideshow. We also deeply appreciate our individual donors. I want to share the following opening lines from our newly adopted strategic plan that I believe speaks to this moment. At the Land Conservancy, we are committed to honoring the lessons of the last 7 generations, just as we work in partnership with others to shape the world the next 7 generations will inherit. This philosophy comes from the Haudenosaunee 7th generation principle. We stand at a juncture. Collectively, can we choose to pivot to create a future that honors this land and all its neighbors? How can the Riverline tell the story of this place in a way that heals us and builds our community? How can we create the Riverline to enhance quality of life now, but also ensure that the project is funded to be resilient and sustainable for the long term? Tonight, we'll share with you where we are in the process of understanding what our neighbors, our history, and the corridor point us towards. We ask for your guidance, your partnership, and your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Now I'd like to introduce Congressman Brian Higgins to say a few words. Congressman?
Thank you, Jay-Jean. Appreciate it very much. Nancy Smith, everybody that's involved in this extraordinary project. You know, we were very excited about this from the outset. The great vision of the Western New York Land Conservancy and your leader, Nancy Smith, in promoting this project. This was all before a pandemic. And now we're going through a pandemic. I think we're coming out of the worst of it. And what we've learned historically, not only in our city, but throughout the country, with pandemics, things change. We had a cholera pandemic, 4 iterations of it in the middle of the 19th century. It led to modern wastewater systems. It led to sewer systems. It led to an inspiration of Buffalo leaders to embrace not one park designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, but a park system with parkways to make them accessible, those parks accessible to everybody. And if you notice in the Olmsted Park system and with its system of parkways, there are no fences, there are no gates, and there are no walls. Because Frederick Law Olmsted, long before he was a landscape architect, he was a journalist for the New York Times, and he covered post-Civil War South, and he saw discrimination and wanted to lay out a park system that was welcoming to all. But he was also a public health worker in the Civil War, and he believed in the healing power of parks. And it's interesting and somewhat ironic that cholera disproportionately hit the old First Ward area where Sarah is from and her family, where the valley is, because at that time, the Irish were pushed to the waterfront because at that time, the poorer you were, the closer you lived to water. The opposite is true today. So this project in post-pandemic Buffalo just takes on an added urgency. It comes at a good time because this Friday, the United States Congress and I, as your representative, will vote to support a $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan advanced by our President, Joe Biden. Discussions are already underway, and I serve on 2 committees that are fundamental to all of this. One is the House Ways and Means Committee. The other is the Budget Committee. We are beginning work on another, in addition, $3 trillion bill, which will include at least $1.5 trillion in infrastructure. I anticipate that to be a major funding source for this project. To recapture the healing power of parks, this Riverline project will begin to give back to a community that gave so much to this city. The land, the natural environment that was taken over by 150 years of industry. So if you look at these Riverline projects that have occurred in other cities, everything around it, the value is enhanced greatly, not only in terms of the economics, but even more importantly, in terms of life quality. So continue with this vision, make it big, make it bold, make it audacious. And I want to put Buffalo, I want to help you, the great visionaries that initiated this project, and we'll see it through to its completion. We want to put Buffalo on the map as not only a river line, but the river line that other cities look to emulate as they seek to recapture old industrial lands, old railroads, into places where people can congregate. And as Frederick Law Olmsted told us many, many years ago, experience the light, the fresh air, and the healing power of parks. I'm so proud to be with all of you, and I pledge to continue to see this project through to its completion.
Well, thank you so much. That's really exciting. Next, I would like to introduce, well, I'm going to show a video. This is from Senator Tim Kennedy and Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, neither of whom could be here tonight, but both wanted to share a message of support for the project. So let me do that. Make sure that works. Here we go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this exciting event. Tonight, we'll see the early design concepts for the Riverline, an accessible, interactive green space that is truly being driven and created by each and every one of you. The Western New York Land Conservancy has repeatedly asked the public, when you envision the future of the Riverline, what do you want to see? And let me tell you, we've seen an overwhelmingly positive response. These design concepts you'll see here tonight were created with feedback from hundreds of Buffalonians. They are a labor of love and a true collaboration between the Conservancy and our greater community. We've all seen our waterfront transformed over the past decade into a recreational space unlike any other, a space that inspires people to get outdoors and embrace all that our city has to offer. With the creation of the Riverline, we now have an incredible opportunity to enhance the foundation we've been building for years. A foundation that will provide new space for Western New Yorkers to explore the outdoors year-round, drive tourism and recreation sectors, and stimulate our small businesses and our economy. This project will further connect people to the burgeoning Outer Harbor, Canal Side, Larkinville, and more, all while honoring and preserving our city's history. Tonight, all of you have an opportunity to help build a component of our city's future, and I encourage you to take a look at these designs and provide your thoughtful, honest feedback. You're a vital part of this process, and it's your vision that's going to make this space the best it can possibly be. A big thank you to the Western New York Land Conservancy for continuing to lead this effort. We recognize all that you do, and we are deeply grateful for your advocacy. I'm looking forward to seeing what tonight brings and can't wait to see this outstanding project continue to move forward. Thank you again for your participation.
Hi, this is Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes. I'd like to congratulate Executive Director Nancy Smith, the Western New York Land Conservancy, and their entire project development team on the progress made to date on the Riverline project. It is not very often that a recreational project of this scope happens within the city of Buffalo. The Western New York Land Conservancy has made every effort to ensure that everyone has a seat at the table to provide input, and are continuing this with tonight's meeting. Thank you for your participation, and I look forward to seeing the results of your input come to fruition.
I'm glad they were able to share that message with us, even if they couldn't be here tonight. So thank you for putting that together. And now I'd like to introduce Sarah Heidinger, who's a longtime resident of the Old First Ward and a really important person for this project. Sarah?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I've been honored to participate in this project since the very beginning, and I take my role as being someone from the neighborhood very seriously, knowing that my input is oftentimes information that the team developing the Riverline may not know. I'm 6th generation Old First Ward. My grandma grew up on St. Clair Street, and my grandpa grew up on Fulton Street. My dad is one of 8, and many of his siblings and their children still live here today. I played on the Dell where the Riverline will be as a child. I spent many afternoons sledding. It's already a pretty magical place. So to think about it in a way that everyone can enjoy that, especially in the time of the pandemic when outdoor space is so important for us, and to have it in our backyard just seems like a perfect fit to me. I think another big thing is over the summer, we took the kids from the Old First Ward Community Center over to Red Jacket Park, which is a very short walk away, but most of the kids in our neighborhood had never been there. So the idea of connecting these parcels of land to me seems really important. And I think the Land Conservancy has done a really great job asking for our input throughout the process. And I encourage everyone watching tonight, everyone in my neighborhood, people all around Buffalo and the surrounding areas, please send your feedback in, participate in this process, look at the designs. You know, we've talked a lot about privacy and things that matter to the residents that live here now. And as Nancy mentioned in her speech in the beginning, I say this all of the time. There's a lot of development happening in the Old First Ward, and it's important that the development happens to us and with us, not around us. And for that to happen, we all need to participate. So I encourage anyone who hasn't yet to please participate. And even if you have, participate again and again and again, because this is a really cool project and I'm really honored to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was great. Now I'd like to introduce Anthony Armstrong, who is our project manager.
Thanks, Jay Jean. Thanks everyone for joining us, and to all the speakers we've already heard from. We couldn't have gotten to where we are today without all of your support. And it's really great to have everyone together, even if it is in a virtual setting. You know, when the Land Conservancy set out to look at this project, it had sort of a singular vision in mind. That was to be a part of a healthy, inclusive, and opportunity-rich city that has vibrancy in every neighborhood. And for all that this project has advanced, that has not changed. You know, the Land Conservancy can use its strengths to help bring people to nature and nature to people, and to bring people together, right? To create this cohesive waterfront and downtown that we can all be proud to call home. And as we look at this space itself, as Sarah said, this is already a magical space. I was out there last week taking some pictures, and it was really just an incredible way to be in a totally different environment, you know, less than 2 miles from my home, being adjacent to the nature within next to Red Jacket Riverfront Habitat Park, transitioning into the really rich heritage within the Old First Ward, and also, you know, continuing on towards the Perry neighborhood and closer to Canal Side. This ribbon of green that runs through the city is something that is really a great place that brings nature into these communities, provides a respite, but right now it's not publicly accessible. It's not somewhere that has seen the attention to detail and thinking about how it becomes a welcoming space for people from these neighborhoods, and a place that can create those sense of connection between communities and to the existing assets in these neighborhoods. So as we look at this corridor, as we look at how we've got here, we always keep that in the context of the neighborhoods that surround it, the neighborhoods that it's embedded in, the Perry, the Old First Ward, and the Valley neighborhoods. People who have been in these neighborhoods for sometimes generations, and their voice needs to come through in this process as we think about the different sections of the Riverline, whether it's the Dell or the Junctures or the Basswoods neighborhoods. These are places that, you know, have their own character, and we want to respect that throughout this design process. And you'll hear more from the design team in just a minute, some ways they're thinking about how that translates. The process itself, the Land Conservancy's been working on this for a number of years now, but the Land Conservancy is not the start of this process. This is something that's been, you know, this is in the city zoning code, that this is green space. This has been in multiple plans from the neighborhood, from economic development agencies. The Land Conservancy is happy to pick that up and continue to move that process forward through all the iterations that it's taken to get here today and all the iterations that it'll take to get further along to actually building this. But this will be rooted in these vision plan guiding principles. We had 1,000 people from the region and from these neighborhoods tell us how this should function, right? That it should respect the character and the history of local communities, that it should embrace and enhance nature along the corridor, that it should provide different kinds of recreational uses, not just in the summer, but year round. People were saying that, this really needs to create connections between assets and think about what future connections look like. We need to think with long-term use, maintenance, and safety in mind. We don't want it to look good on day one and then in 5 years wonder, well, who's taking care of this thing? Thinking about this from the beginning, and how does this provide a catalyst? How does this serve as a way for additional opportunity and additional investment that's with and for the neighborhood and not, as Sarah said, happening to the neighborhood? So that is one big piece of how we're thinking about this. Another one is thinking about equity, keeping that front and center, having a framework that thinks about building community, building housing, incorporating arts and culture, nature and community wellness, how we're governing this for the long term, and what economic access and development looks like when we're building this Riverline for tomorrow and for the future. We also, have taken great inspiration from some of the projects you've heard about throughout the Highline network in cities like New York or Detroit or Toronto or Los Angeles or Milwaukee. These are cities that are reusing infrastructure that was sort of neglected and forgotten about and making it a new special place for their communities. And we're very excited that this year we were actually welcomed into the Highline network to think very critically, like many of these partners in the Highline network do, about equity, about what it means to be in a place, to be a good neighbor, and to provide that space for coming together, for experiencing your city in a whole new way. So we're proud to be a part of that, but that's only a piece of what we continue to do, right? Continue to root this in community is maybe the number one thing that we remind ourselves every day. And so even throughout the pandemic, we've been making sure to have that outreach. This is an incredible mural that I want to just mention Chris Kemek and the work he did with neighborhood artists who are youth, right, from the neighborhoods across the entire river communities. This is just an amazing mural that sparks feelings of what this community is capable of every time I go past it. We also want to thank the folks who came out this October, masked up, social distance, and gave us their feedback on a really rainy and chilly day. But we had people come out, and you'll hear more about this from the design team, that people want to see this done, but they want to see it done right. And we want to listen to that and honor that. And you also see some of the pictures that folks in these neighborhoods took and said, this is how we see our community, and this is what we want to think about going forward. So even though we're several years into this work and designing this project, we're still at the early stages of concept design. So today we're at our concept design alternatives. In April, we'll see a preferred concept design, and then in June, we'll hopefully have the final concept design that will give us a good sense of what this should look like when it's completed. As we go through today's presentation, there is a live poll. This is in the description of the YouTube video. You can open this on your phone or your tablet or in a different window. But as you click on that link, you'll see that it pops up. Right now, it's asking what your zip code is. So I have mine open here. Let me switch over to that window so you can see what it looks like for me. Right now, mine is asking me what my zip code looks like, where my zip code is. And so all I do is type that in. I'll type in my response, and then I'll hit submit, and then it'll wait for the next question. So if you haven't done that yet and you want to participate in the live polling, please go ahead and log into that. And after the zip code, we're going to lob another sort of softball question at you here just to get us warmed up. So we're going to move to the next question. That question is going to be, do you like sunshine and rainbows? All right, So we're going to ask you if you like sunshine and rainbows. We'll leave that one up for a minute. 100% in so far said yes, they're great. So we're going to ask you some little bit tougher questions as we go, but nothing too hard. This is a way that we can get your instant feedback. There'll be other opportunities for feedback that we'll talk about later on. But as we continue through this process, we want to make sure that we keep our eyes and ears open, that we have multiple ways for people to interact. And that's the way that we can ensure that this will be a project that works for everyone and everyone feels welcome in. So that's what I have to share about getting us started, but I want to get to the main event here, our design team from W Architecture, Hood Design Studios, and Green Shield Ecology. So I'll turn it over now, and we'll hear what they've been working on.
Thanks, Anthony. And let me just introduce the team. So again, this is our main presentation, what we've all been waiting for. You're going to hear from Barbara Wilkes from W Architecture, Landscape Architecture, Walter Hood from Hood Design, and Stephen Handel from Green Shield Design. So take it away.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you see the screen? Great. Hi, I'm Barbara Wilkes, and I'm so honored to be here tonight, and thank you all for joining us. I'm here with several partners, as Jay Jean just told you, from my design team, Stephen Handel and Walter Hood, and we are eager to report back on our activities and get your comments so we can move forward to more specific design. We're going to go over 3 basic areas tonight. We want to share with you what we've learned from the site and the communities from our visits and research. We're going to talk about some of the elements of the Riverline, and by this I mean different parts that we need to make the place. And then we want to ask you, how do you feel about this place? How do you envision it? So let's get started. If I can press the right button. It's not moving. Okay, there we go. What we learned from communities. Try again, there we go. Okay, so this is the area we've been studying, and we're calling it the river communities. It's the space between I-190 and the Buffalo River. This is an area that was home to many indigenous communities as a part of the Buffalo Creek Reservation. It's also an area of intense industrial development. First the canals and then the railroads, including the DL&W, which is now the remnants are the Riverline. This area is home to several communities, each with its own history, but all having a general need to be reconnected to the larger river communities and the larger greater Buffalo area. I probably should orient you to this map because you're going to see it a lot. This is the Buffalo River. Here's your outer harbor out here, and there's the Riverline, the downtown to the left, and the red areas outlined are the parcels that are the Riverline. So what did we hear from the communities and some of those pictures that you saw Anthony showing in the fall when we came out? There were 4 different themes really that came out, and the first was nature. There's a strong reverence for nature, the plants and animals that have come to call this area home, and there's a strong concern for their well-being. There's also a wish for family-friendly activities, some that exist already, like sledding and fishing, and then also some new ones like playgrounds and others. There's a desire to incorporate history of the communities as a part of the Riverline story through art or other means. And there's a request that any changes that take into account the safety and security of the residents as increased visitors are drawn to the Riverline. We've also learned from past surveys what types of activities you would like to see, with the majority emphasizing nature and quiet, more passive places. Oops. So let us know if this all sounds right. Did we miss anything important? as a part of this community outreach, as Nancy mentioned, there was also a photo project. People were given cameras and to go out and photograph their communities to let us know about their experiences and what they thought was important. Most are from walking in their communities, visiting with friends. Others are from driving around the community. And they give us a good picture of the everyday life and the special moments in the river community. And we encourage you to send more. So I guess this may be one of the questions on your survey. Tell us your favorite places in the Buffalo River communities. You know, this could be anything from a spot you like to fish to your favorite restaurant. It could be really any favorite type of place that just give us an idea of where people enjoy going. So what we have learned from the site. Visiting the site in the past months and researching its changing ecology has taught us about resiliency and rejuvenation. The site has transformed from a barren industrial land to a scrubby green mosaic of fields and woodlands. You can see the outline of the actual Riverline site. The site is part of a larger ecological framework that our ecologist, Stephen Handel, will discuss with us further. Stephen.
Thank you. The Riverline landscape is an urban area, as you all know, embedded in a residential and industrial area. Oh, some ecological structure is still present, front yards, street trees, and of course the river. What can we add back to enrich this area to make it more special? This region of Western New York State is rich with many habitat types. This picture shows the Riverline on the left, and you see all the different colors representing different community types throughout. The Riverline will be a living link, a stepping stone for nature, if you will, and joining up the different remnants and sustaining them. The Riverline will allow movement among areas of animals and seeds of plants to enrich all these parcels of this region. Next. Yeah. Well, the Riverline has an urban character now, but we're near the Buffalo River and Lake Erie, and we're actually part of a very rich natural heritage. An important bird area, the state calls it, with coastal habitats and even some rare species. We want to make the new Riverline support these natural resources as well as our own quality of life. Next. Well, the Riverline is green now, but it's mostly weedy species, not many native species, not much historic biodiversity of this part of our state. Much of the land is disturbed. We want to improve on this. Next. Well, the Riverline can be a beautiful green corridor for our communities, adding so much to the current streetscape, which has fewer trees than many other areas. In this map, the yellow dots represent locations without trees. Think about what the new Riverline can do and bring to us. Next. The ecological benefits for residents and for visitors are many, in addition to being habitat for animals. Cleaner air and water for us, pollinators for gardens and for urban agricultural plots, and increasing their yield. Locations for jobs and training in environmental fields. New educational resources for our local public schools, and an inspiration to us all. The Riverline is for us as well as for our natural heritage. Barbara, you want to introduce this?
Again, I guess this is on the phone, but we'd like to know on the map. Oops, wrong. Okay, there we go. Please let us know your favorite wild place in the Buffalo River communities. Thanks, Stephen. So now we want to share with you the second part of the discussion, which is what are the elements of the Riverline? So we're gonna talk about this in 3 parts, and this is not really a design per se, but these elements are the things that go together to make the river line. So we need the line at the top, which is the sort of the path. How do we go about making that? We need linkages down to on top of the berms down to the community. And then we need a framework to connect, to get people to this area, to connect it to the larger Greater Buffalo. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. So we're going to go through these one by one, and we're going to start with the line and making the path. So the vision is to have a path that is welcoming and accessible to all, people of all ages and abilities and backgrounds. So to make this path, we actually need 3 different types of elements. We need entries, we need bridges, and then we need the path that connects those all together. So let's start with the entries, and these are the accessible entries. There may be other minor spots of entrance, but these are the main accessible entries, and they will be used by residents as well as visitors. We've placed the accessible entries to support the natural flow on neighborhood commercial corridors, which typically run north-south in these communities and connect the communities to the river and other amenities. For instance, on this slide, there's 4 of the 7, which are on Moore Street, Chicago Street, Louisiana Street, and Hamburg Street. Further to the east, we're also recommending accessible entries at Smith Street, and then at the terminus of the river line, connecting to South Park Avenue. So what is an accessible entry? What we mean by that is they are sloped to allow for universal access, and they may be elevated above the grade to allow for existing vegetation that has taken years to grow to remain and continue to evolve. And here's we're going to be showing you throughout this some sort of pictures of what we mean by this to help you visualize. They're not, these are from other places. They're not the designs. We want to get your feedback. The next step will be to make these into specific designs for the Riverline. So the next element is the bridges. So bridges are needed to connect the mounds, which currently remain from the DL&W line, into one continuous path. Do you think all these bridges are necessary? We're showing 5 new bridges and 2 renovated bridges. So 4 show on this map. We have one over Louisiana Street, connecting the 2 berms, the second over Alabama Street, then over Hamburg and Sidway. So these would allow you to keep walking along the elevated path. Then we also are recommending one over Smith Street, where there are the existing concrete trestles right now, and then the 2 renovated bridges so that you can actually use them. Right now they're dangerous. Oops, oh, sorry, back. Oh, no, I can't go back. Oh. There, okay, sorry. Pedestrian bridges, what could they be? They could either be prefabricated or special. They could all be the same. They could all be different. The renovated bridges look like the left right now, and they could look something like on the right to allow passage. And then there's one place that we haven't talked about that also needs to be connected, and that's we're calling the trestle bridge, because there's a wide space, at least 200 feet going over the active railroad, which would require a large bridge. And then we have some flat land that's not elevated, not part of the series of mounds, which seems like by the time you'd ramp down, you'd just be going right back up. So the idea of just sort of keeping level and walking from one side to the other and being able to enjoy the view out over the landscape and seeing some of the industrial remnants. So here is the trestle bridge. These are those flat lawns you see in the distance on the left in the background, the mound on the other side of the railroad track, and then you could connect via something like these examples across to the Catherine Street mound. And then, so now we have a connection going all the way across, and now we just need the 2 miles of paths to be able to walk one place from the other. So just a little over half of that is shown on this side of the map. And then we have just a little less than half on around the Smith Street area, connecting all the way out to the half bridge and the river. And paths, you know, could be anything from a mown path to gravel fines to bituminous concrete or separated bike and pedestrian paths. So your input is important. Are we making the right pathways? Okay, so after we have the path, at the next scale, we're looking to connect the Riverline to the communities. The idea being that with the vision that the Riverline will be an inspiring community gathering place. So one of the places to gather is at important junctures of the Riverline with the community. These linkages build on some of the accessible entries and again are selected where there is space to gather away from quiet residential streets. So here we have 5 suggested gathering spaces. So the first one is Moore Street, which is at the western terminus of the Riverline. It's a 1 block long street, which is adjacent to Riverfest Park. So there's an opportunity here to create a gathering place that could start with temporary closure of the street for special events. This would require coordination with the city, and in fact, all the elements of this part of the plan would require that. And we are beginning discussions with them pending your response to this idea. So, you know, we need to understand if you like it or not. Louisiana Street, it would be a second potential gathering space. There are a group of community facilities and commercial establishments that are scattered along the street at the foot of the Riverline. There's also a vacant former police station. Louisiana Street can be expanded out into the current parking lane in areas to bring the ecology of the Riverline into the neighborhood. You see the picture on the left of the existing condition and on the right with possibility of what it could be like. So there's a chance to improve pedestrian connections between the Riverline, Conway Park, and then the communities. The station could be made into a welcome station for the Riverline with public restrooms, places for orientation, and community meetings. Again, this would require coordination with the city, and we're needing your input on these ideas to promote further discussion. A new sort of gathering place is possible at the junctures. This is where the bridge over the active rail line and the trestle to Catherine Street come together with another potential link north to Larkinville and west to Ohio Street via Republic Street. This X crossing has the potential to make a place with a view away from residential communities, yet at a crossroads of multimodal travel. Do you think this would be a good idea? Here's what it looks like now, crossing the existing tracks. And here's some examples from other kinds of bridges that are also gathering places. The fourth major gathering space is at Smith Street and the riverfront. Here is the opportunity to really get the most out of our riverfront location. We recommend improving the park entrance with a parking area and some orientation signage and wayfinding, because really this is one of the major entries to the Riverline itself. Smith Street and Basswoods Pier become a destination at the end of Smith Street, usable for gathering and meeting friends. The cove to the east of the pier terminates with the view of the tilted bridge, as you see on the left, Even though you can see the water, you actually can't get down to the edge of the water. So it could become a more accessible waterfront like you see on the right, with places for groups and individuals to enjoy special moments on the river, enjoying nature. And then finally, the half bridge, together with the double bridge, make a special place at the eastern end of the river line that celebrates the industrial heritage of the site as well as the river location. Its wonderful views make it a natural gathering space to end the river line and provide connection to the future river access point envisioned by Buffalo Waterkeeper here. So here's what it looks like today. That bridge that, finishes halfway across the river. Here's an example of sort of people meeting on similar kind of overlook pier bridge. So again, we really would like your input. Are these the right community linkages? And which do you think are most important? So finally, there is the framework to connect to the greater Buffalo. This, of course, requires coordination with other city agencies. But it's a vision of a revitalized community and a restored ecosystem that is such key to the mission of the Riverline. So we will work to integrate the Riverline with pedestrian and other types of mobility, including boats that are linkages to the communities and to the river. So here we have the boat connection, actually right on our property to the Buffalo Blue Way. Then we have the links to the parks, which we would want to coordinate access and allow free flowing from one to the other. We want to leverage the growth of the existing communities along their commercial corridors by funneling visitors to these arteries, and then expand these arteries into more complex pedestrian and bicycle network that links the river communities to each other and to the downtown, Larkinville, and other areas. And then finally, bring the ecology of the Riverline out to create healthier and more vibrant communities. So again, let us know what you think, if there are other networks that should be considered. And so talking about healthier and more green communities brings us to part 3, which is about the Riverline and its nature. Walter will walk us through a discussion drawing on different images we heard in our community conversations. Walter, just let me know when to click too.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Stephen. Now we're at the part of the presentation where we've just looked at the line, the possible spaces that they would connect to, and then its larger context into the city. Stephen talked about the ecology, but how do we really want to imagine this place? What do we want it to mean? And how do we want to make it memorable? Next. So I'm going to take you through 3 different ways in which we can actually try to imagine this place. The first is Refuge. The second is a set of gardens. And the third is a place of recreation. Now, at the end of the day, we're probably going to have a little bit of each one of these coming together, because I know there's a diverse sort of understanding. But with the place of refuge, we were inspired by the tribal communities here who said that this has always been a place of refuge. And so we're not thinking of it just as a place for plants and animals, but also for people. Gardens are probably the most idiosyncratic kinds of things we can design. People have gardens in their houses, but we could also have gardens out in public space. And lastly, what do you do here? Do we want this to be a place where you come with your boat and recreate, or do we have a different way of thinking about recreation? Next. So let's start with the place of refuge. Next. So here we would have a contiguous connected corridor that would be a habitat for people and plants and animals. Can you imagine this as a place that's wild, a place that you could come and be alone, or a place that you could collectively come together and be with others in the community? Next. But we might have program here. There might be ways in which we might have nature play. There might be viewing platforms to look at different parts of the ecology. Or Stephen talked about, there might be trails that take you out into this wilder landscape. Next. We might have quiet places that are inspired, again, by some of our tribal communities, and also how we might think about being neighbors. We might have paths that take us through these spaces. The spaces could be wild, but the paths could be very clear. And we could also have boardwalks or elevated spaces that don't disturb the ground plane. Next. And we're also thinking about how art and history and culture can play itself out. So within the refuge, we're thinking that here's a place where artists would be interested in mining that ecology and nature to create spaces that they could relate to previous cultures being on site. They could talk about the healthy nature of ecology, or they could just basically use the medium of landscape to actually make landscape work, as you see here with Andy Goldsworthy on the left. Next. Or beginning to mine them to tell different stories. Maybe there are stories of how people actually used to use the landscape for different resources. On the left, you have Spire, which is made of felling trees in Golden Gate Park. In the middle, you have a path for two lovers, which is a metaphor. One of the paths is made of metal, the other is made of wood, and slowly as it ages, one disappears. So we can bring art into the landscape so that we can actually, again, create meaning, but also a conversation to think about culture and history. Next. So with Refuge, we've listed some of our program. What would you like to see in the Refuge? Would you want to see nature play, wildlife viewing, trails, quiet places, pathways, boardwalks, environmental art, indigenous art? So I think here you make your selections. Next. Gardens. The next way we can look at this is small incremental pieces of landscape that are cultivated in different ways. Next. The gardens here could create this really beautiful, diverse spectrum of place that could go from something wild to something directly relating to the diversity of the program and community, but it could also be tied to each block. Just imagine if you went from block to block and had a different set of gardens along the way. Next. When we think of gardens, the first thing that might come to mind is subsistence gardens that we see in community gardens. But we would also think about the ecology, a butterfly garden, a garden of pollinators that would attract different types of butterflies and bird species. Next. Or we might have solar gardens. We might have a garden that captures the sun. You could imagine an outdoor classroom as a garden. You could imagine a food garden, but not maybe at the scale of the neighborhood, but it could actually be at the scale of the greater neighborhood. Next. We could also think of beer gardens. These are wonderful places to go on a hot day. Or we could have a stormwater garden. This would be a place to go when it rains. I teach landscape architecture, and all of my students, when it rains, they go to the creeks because they want to see the water running. But this could be a way and a place to begin to understand the world in which you live. Next. And within the garden, we have the opportunity to bring individuals and local artists to actually begin to tell a story about place. We saw very early doing the presentation where art is already being sort of transferred into the space. But maybe some of the walls, we can carve them. Maybe some of the inert material, we can begin to stack them. Maybe we start to see images of ourselves in these wild gardens. Next. But the garden art, we think, could really, really capture the essence of the space. It could give it, that personal, but also that immanence. So instead of thinking about industry, maybe we can take those pieces of industry, those things that are left over, and reshape them and reimagine them. Can we imagine the nature, the ecology, the wildlife being part of this landscape? And as we arrive at these gardens, are there ways in which we want to think of them as a collection of gardens or individual gardens, and this idea of a gate. So you can imagine arriving home and opening the gate to your garden, but maybe each of our gardens have a special way in. Barbara talked about some of the architecture to cross the roads, and maybe the bridges can become gates, but maybe they can be standalone pieces themselves so that you actually see them off in the distance and they welcome you. Next. In the garden, we know we need bridges. And as Barbara talked about, there are a lot of different ways we can think about bridging. We're interested in recalling some of that industrial history within the bridge. And so imagine the gates, the bridges, the gardens all coming together to create a very distinct place. Maybe our bridges are more sculptural. Maybe we think about what material they're made of. You see 3 different types here. Maybe they're thin, maybe they're thick, maybe they're big, maybe they're small. We need to think about them in a myriad of ways. And so what programs would you like to see in the gardens? Again, do you want to see wall art, stone art, neighborhood gardens, butterfly gardens, solar gardens, outdoor classroom gardens, food gardens, beer gardens, water gardens? So this is your chance to tell us. And if it's not on the list, you can tell us what kind of garden you want. Next. Or what kind of gates and bridges would you like to see? The top one is in Oakland, California, that has the Black heroes of the neighborhood in the street, Barack Obama and Maya Angelou. Maybe there are people that we want to actually emblazon within the landscape. Maybe there is recalling the old trestle bridges, as you see number 6. Or maybe it's creating a new kind of architecture that pushes against that old industrial look. And finally, when we think of most public spaces in cities and neighborhoods, in many times we think of them only as recreation. We'd like to ask the question though, how can we look at our spot in a different way, and how can we reimagine what recreation might be? Next. And we heard from the community, particularly about play, and we know we have existing parks and we have existing connections to water. So what are our opportunities? Do we make 4 distinct spaces? Do we try to integrate the parks so that they seem seamless and it becomes one big thing? Do we add new program? Do we think about the winter time? And do we begin to articulate the ground plane for ice skating, capturing water? Do we have markets where people are actually shopping and going for Christmas trees? Or do we allow the hills to go barren and actually become a place for sledding? Or during the summertime, when there is no snow on the ground, do we utilize this notion of water, right? Water around us. Are there performances? How big are the performances? Are there different types of markets? Do markets occur frequently, or do they occur almost every day? Do we really think about, when we aggregate as a community, that the recreation that we provide spaces for things to happen, like on streets? Can streets somehow be closed at certain times and actually take on new meanings? Can we reimagine playgrounds instead of having the standard rubber mats, standardized playground equipment? Can we actually use the landscape as a playground? Can we shape it and embolden it? And lastly, what we're probably all feeling these days on COVID and looking at the Zoom, fitness. Can we get out and walk that mile? Can we walk that mile a couple of times? And how do we want to move through the landscape? Next. And so things become, elements of landscape becomes really important. Lawns are really important for a diversity of different types of uses without spelling them out. Again, giving access to water allow for us to utilize that water in a different way. And then when we think about art, again, how do we tell stories, or how do we give people these places, these objects, these sculptures that they can actually recreate? They might be places of gathering for leisure. There might be along a walk, you might encounter different things. Next. Or they might force you to actually see and move through the landscape in a different way. On the left-hand side, we have the wave field by Maya Lin. This might give us a different way to see the landscape. I could even imagine as kids running up and over those hills, up and over those hills. Or the one on the far right is a water storage. It actually is a place that you can actually use as an amphitheater and for different uses, but it also catches water. And in the middle, we have a Janet's beautiful cloud overhead that might provide a space underneath. So again, like the others, we want to know which programs would you like to see. Ice skating, again, some of these are temporal and some of these are permanent. I'm not going to go through the list, but it's just a repeat of what I just went through. But we'd like to hear what you would like to sort of see within the recreation portion of the presentation. We need your input. So which of these visions do you prefer? If you prefer them all, I would check them all. If you want to put them in between one or the other, I'm halfway between gardens and recreation. You could do that if you want to be between gardens and refuge, but this gives you a way to tell us where you would like the emphasis of a program and of meaning to manifest. Recreation, refuge, and gardens. Okay, Barbara. Or is it?
Thanks, Walter. But I think actually, Anthony, were you going to do next steps?
Yeah, I think this is Anthony's turn now. That was really exciting to see. It's fun to see it all starting to come together. I think let's just turn it over to Anthony to do some next steps and some closing remarks before we finish tonight. Anthony.
Thanks, Jay Jean. Thanks to Barbara and to Walter and to Stephen for walking us through these initial concepts. I also want to thank everyone who's been participating in the live poll. I know that it was moving pretty quickly, but this isn't your only chance to provide input. And in just a second, I'll walk through what that looks like for you to be able to continue to give us your input, continue to see this presentation again, or see this presentation in new ways. So we have just a couple more ways to look at it for today. The last question that Walter left us with, how do you imagine the Riverline? Just posted that one for folks to look at. But at the same time, we want to invite you to think about coming back and providing more input, providing another look at it once you get a chance to sit with this material and this information. I know it was a lot that came at you quickly here, but I do want to give you some instant feedback from what you've given us. While we are continuing to gather your current feedback, Barbara, if you could just unshare your screen for a second. I want to show folks some of the word clouds that have popped up here as we wrap up this part of the input process. We've got a few things to share here. The name of your favorite place in the Buffalo River communities. A lot jumping out there, a lot of familiar names, a lot of places that we've certainly become more and more familiar with throughout the course of working with the communities to design this project. We've also asked, are there other things that we should consider for the paths? And that's popped up a lot: lighting, walking, biking, access and bridges and wayfinding. These are just really quick responses, really quick feedback to what we've heard so far. In addition, for gathering places and connections, gathering pops up here as the center most repeated word here, but thinking about how do we access it? How does this connect to the harbor? Was the waterfront, right? All of these are things that we'll take back, process this information, and make sure that it helps to translate these options into the next iteration of these designs. And then other networks. You all actually submitted a lot of other networks that we should be thinking about. Everything from public transportation to Larkinville, what it looks like to reach boats in the water. So all of these are certainly things that we'll want to hear more about from you. And you can do that in a couple of different ways. After this presentation, you can go to the Western New York Land Conservancy's website. There you'll see some options to watch this video again if you want to spend some more time with it and take it in. We'll actually put the survey back on the site so you can go through that again if you'd like to take it that way. We also have an interactive platform that we'll be asking people to take a look at, to spend some time with, and you can provide answers to all these survey questions there as well. And that's also accessible from the Land Conservancy's website at the end of this presentation. In terms of the other next steps for us, as we said before, we are right now in our first of 3 public meetings to talk about this progression. The next one should be in April and then one in late June. That will get us to the point of having a much better sense of what the Riverline can look like. But again, we want you to come back and take another look at this presentation, continue to share more feedback, and also share this with others who may not have been able to join us live for this. We want to make sure we're casting this as far as we can to make sure that that feedback continues to represent what the community really wants to see here.
Well, thank you, Anthony. And I think that is the conclusion of our program tonight. If you were obviously able to watch it tonight, that's great. The link on YouTube for this presentation will stay up, so you can go back, watch it again, and share it with people. We want more people to see this than just who are able to be here tonight. I want to thank someone who is sort of in the background, who wasn't on the presentation tonight, but who's really made a lot of this possible. So Alexa Ringer, who's AmeriCorps working with us, she does all the behind the scene things, and she's done a great job. So she's really excellent to have on the team. So thank you, Alexa. And then everyone out there, we need your ideas. So do go to our website, do provide your feedback, do send us questions that are at the Riverline at WNYLC.org email. And then, we also need your support. If this Riverline project, if this matters to you, if biodiversity matters to you, if climate change and conservation and water matter to you, please donate. And you can donate on our website, WNYLC.org. That's what's going to make this project possible. So in addition to your feedback, your comments, your questions, if you can support the project, that would be really important right now. So again, if you have any other questions or comments, you can email us at theriverline@WNYLC.org. You can call 716-687-1225. And with that, I just want to say